Hello. In this asynchronous lecture, I will talk about chapter 12 of the intermediate macro textbook of Stephen Williamson. The title of the chapter is Money, Banking, Prices, and Monetary Policy. The learning objectives of this chapter are sevenfold. There are 7 of them. One is the functions of money and how money is measured. Number 2 is constructing the so-called monetary intertemporal model, which doesn't really differ much from the model that was obtained back in chapter 11. Number 3 is deriving the Fisher relation, the relationship named after Irving Fisher, an American economist of 19th century. Then talking about the competitive equilibrium in the monetary intertemporal model and doing some experiments with it. Demonstrating that money is neutral in the monetary intertemporal model. We are going to define what we mean by money being neutral, or so-called monetary neutrality within the chapter. Listing factors that can potentially shift money demand and how that shift may affect some economic variables in the model. And then finally, we are going to talk about something what we are going to call a liquidity trap. Okay. Now before we start the intertemporal model, the first thing that we are going to talk about, as I said, functions of money. And basically, we argue that money is something that fulfills 3 functions, so to speak. These functions are 1, the medium of exchange, 2, the store of value, 3, the unit of account. Medium of exchange is basically, as its name suggests, money is the medium of exchange. We use money to exchange for goods and services. We are not doing a barter economy in which we are exchanging goods and services for goods and services. Instead, we use money to do that transactions. That's the medium of exchange function of money. Store of value, money stores value, not intrinsically, so to speak. Within the banknote, within the coin, we store value, which we can basically carry from one year to another, from one month to another, from one period to another. Of course, money easily loses this function under inflationary periods, obviously. And then the unit of account, basically money provides a unit of account. We express the value of goods and services in monetary units. We say, I don't know, this computer is $1,000. So like we express, if dollar is our currency, if dollar is our money, then we express the value of goods and services such as the laptop, computer, using money. And I have 3 slides that I can share with you that money can easily lose the store of value function in inflationary times. This picture is from post-World War I Germany, where the German economy was experiencing hyperinflation, which is consistent 3-digit inflation, where the banknotes there, so this woman is burning banknotes to get some heat, and those banknotes basically don't have any value due to the hyperinflation. They lose value very quickly, and therefore they don't have any purchasing power, so to speak, and therefore a better use is using them to basically burn ovens. And there are also instances of money or banknotes being used as toilet paper because, again, they did not have better uses. And then I have 2 banknotes to share with you. One from Turkey, a 20 million banknote, which I think in its peak, or at the time it was issued first time, you can go, maybe, I don't know, you can maybe buy 3-4 movie theater tickets with it. So even though it's like million, you are a millionaire, it doesn't really mean anything. And another example of a banknote comes from the Yugoslavia during the Yugoslavian Civil War, and this is 500 billion. Yes, 500 billion dinar, Yugoslavian dinar. Okay, so these are the functions of money. Now we come to the notion of measures of money. How to measure the amount of money. Here we have 2 main, or actually 3 main measures. We have actually more than that, but at this level, it's enough that we only talk about three of them. One is the so-called monetary base. Monetary base is basically the physical money, either in circulation or reserves of vaults of banks. Okay. This is called monetary base, or sometimes outside money, or sometimes it is denoted by a notation of M0. It's all the currency in circulation in our pockets, plus in the vaults of bank, physically printed money. Or coined money. Coins also are part of it. M1 is another measure, a further measure, includes everything in M0, plus it also includes transaction deposits, traveler's checks, and demand deposits. So basically, these are checking account balances that you can easily, withdraw from ATMs without breaking the term structure of the deposit. And some, of course, in different countries they have different names: transaction deposits, time deposits, demand deposits, checking accounts. But these are basically like without any notification to the bank. These are money holding accounts that you can withdraw without any notification, prior notification to the bank. And of course, you either get zero interest rate or very low interest rate for them. M2 includes everything in M1, plus what we call saving deposits. These are basically, and also retail money market funds, which is not very important, but saving deposits are, they carry a higher rate. These are basically deposits that have a term, so to speak, like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You just tell the bank that, you are just depositing the money for that term, whatever it is, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And you also accordingly get an interest rate potentially. But if you withdraw your money earlier than the term ends, then of course you lose all the potential interest that you could have earned otherwise. Okay. Now, these are the measures of money. Now we come to something what we call the Fisher equation. This is something that was, as I said, an American economist, 19th century, early 20th century American economist, Irving Fisher, something coined by him. To obtain that, first of all, the equation is obtained from this equation. I'm going to be explaining step by step, no worries. But first of all, we have to remember the fact that inflation is this. Inflation, we are denoting inflation by the letter I. What is inflation? Percentage change in the CPI, right? That's what we have learned before. Inflation is equal to the percentage change in the CPI, Consumer Price Index. And let's say CPI is denoted by P. So the current period CPI is P. Next period, next year, next month, whatever, CPI is P prime. So the percentage change in CPI is simply going to be P prime minus P divided by P, or in other words, P prime over P minus 1. These are just the same thing, referring to the same thing. This is what we call inflation. Now, like for example, if P is 100, P prime is 120, 120 minus 100 divided by 100, 20% inflation. Now, the Fisher equation now is basically coming from this. Now, first of all, we have to think about the following. What is an interest rate? And of course, when we talk about what's an interest rate, we have to differentiate between two kinds of interest rate: nominal interest rate, real interest rate. And as you might all know, actually, we have seen in the very back of chapter 1 that when nominal interest rate is denoted by the capital letter R and the real interest rate is denoted by the lowercase letter r, the relationship between the nominal and the real interest rate is that nominal interest rate minus inflation is equal to real interest rate. Actually, this is an approximate relationship. So real interest rate is approximately, not exactly, but approximately equal to nominal interest rate minus inflation. Why? Let me tell you. Now, nominal interest rate is the interest rate, when you buy a bond, government bonds, private sector, firm bonds, whatever, or you deposit your money. let's say $100,000 you are depositing in the bank. The bank is offering you 10%. So in 1 year, and therefore in 1 year you get back $110,000. So this 10% is the nominal interest rate. Okay. However, $110,000 next year is not equal to $110,000 this year if there is inflation. In terms of purchasing power, there is some erosion in the purchasing power. Now the question is, how can we measure that? So basically, like, $1, let's say we have $1 here in the denominator, right? It's like this. Now here I have the relationship 1 plus R is equal to, let me just use the annotation tool to make this maybe easier to understand. So we have now 1 plus real interest rate. 1 plus real interest rate is the increase in the purchasing power, so to speak. Now, if I have a $1 bond today, its purchasing power is 1 divided by today's price level. That $1 bond, let's say, gives a nominal interest rate equal to R, and it becomes 1 plus R next year. But that 1 plus R next year, we have to basically express it in purchasing power terms. We have to divide it by P prime, which is the basically the level of the price level next year, P prime. So therefore, basically, the purchasing power of 1 plus R dollars next year is 1 plus R divided by P prime. Whereas the purchasing power of $1 this year is 1 over P. And the ratio, the purchasing power next year divided by purchasing power this year is 1 plus interest rate, 1 plus real interest rate. So basically the equation itself is 1 plus nominal interest rate divided by next year's price level, next year's CPI, divided by 1 over this year's CPI. This is 1 plus real interest rate. And then if you bring up terms together, so this is P prime in the denominator of the numerator and P in the denominator of the denominator. So this denominator of denominator comes as numerator all the way up. So it becomes P prime over P here, or in other words, in the denominator it is 1 plus I. If you remember that P prime over P prime over P is equal to 1 plus I. So remember, again, if I go back to the previous slide, we have this here, or in other words, 1 plus I is nothing but P prime divided by P. So P prime over P is nothing but 1 plus I. So, and we have P prime over P here. In the denominator of the numerator, we have P prime. In the denominator of the denominator, we have P. So it can be basically in the denominator, we have P prime over P. Or in the denominator, we have 1 plus I. And in the numerator, we have 1 plus capital R. Therefore, this equation actually translates to 1 plus lowercase r equal to 1 plus capital R divided by 1 plus I. And if you now further do the following, so 1 plus, so you can look at the math here if you want. Then, there's all these math here. So 1 plus R is equal to 1 plus R divided by P prime divided by 1 over P, or 1 plus R divided by P prime over P, or 1 plus R divided by 1 plus I. So now we have this equation, the second equation over here. Then we can take this 1 plus I to the left-hand side. If we do that, 1 plus R times 1 plus I is equal to 1 plus R. If I open up the parentheses, if I do this multiplication, 1 plus R plus I plus R times I is equal to 1 plus R. I can cancel out once. I end up with lowercase r plus I plus R times I, this red term, is equal to capital R. Now, generally, R, lowercase r, is a number between 0 and 1. Generally, not always, but generally, inflation I is a number between 0 and 1. So, and then these are small numbers between 0 and 1. And even like lowercase r can even be negative sometimes, but that's another matter. R times I is therefore even smaller because the product of two numbers between 0 and 1 is generally even smaller. Therefore, this product R times I can easily be ignored. And therefore, not in exact terms, but in approximate terms, this can be written as this. Lowercase r is approximately equal to capital R minus I. This is where it comes from. So here, this is called the Fisher equation, Fisher relationship, whatever you call it. But basically, it's an equation that comes from this. Okay, this is what we see here. And if you want to look at the relationship between the nominal R, capital R, and inflation, they are positively related. Of course, not, perfect correlation. And the difference, or the roughly difference, approximate difference, which is R, is given here. Of course, this is all data from the US economy. Okay. Okay, now we are done with the first 3 learning objectives of this chapter. We explained the functions of money. Oh, and derive the Fisher relation, not first 3, first 2, or first and the third, I'm sorry, because we haven't constructed the monetary intertemporal model yet. We are going to be doing now, okay? Now, the monetary intertemporal model, in order to see the monetary intertemporal model, first we are going to be obtaining the money demand and the money supply curves. But before that, remember, in chapter 11, we have seen the real intertemporal model where we have looked at the equilibrium in the goods market as denoted by the output supply and the output demand curves, and also the equilibrium in the labor market as denoted by the labor demand and the labor supply curves. Similarly here, we are going to be looking at the equilibrium in the money market with the money demand and the money supply curves. But before obtaining the money demand and the money supply curves, and particularly the money demand curve, we have to first of all consider the financial sector and basically the sector for payments. So here, we have this assumption that all goods must either be purchased with currency or credit cards. Okay, with currency or credit cards. Credit cards are assumed to be basically, to be stand-in or more or representative of debt cards and checks, and all alternative means of payment supplied by the financial system. And goods purchased at price P, no matter what means of payment is used. Now, what we see is that in order to use a credit card for a purchase, not cash, but credit card, there is a cost that you need to basically bear, which is denoted by Q. Okay. And the credit supply, which is basically supplied by banks, is given by this excess of Q function, which is increasing in Q. The higher the cost of using credit card for users of credit card, the more credit supply will be supplied by the banks. It's like every other supply curve. Supply is an increasing function of price. And Q can be interpreted as price of using credit cards. The higher the price, the more credit the banks will tend to supply. And also supplying credit card services is also costly for banks. The supply curve looks like this. This is the quantity of credit card services. This is basically the Q, the price of credit card services, and it's a positive slope. Okay. So this is all about the supply. When it comes to demand, in the next slide, quantity of goods purchased with credit card services, we denote it by XD of Q, and basically all other goods are purchased with cash. So XD of Q units of goods are purchased with a credit card. The remaining goods, which is y minus xd of q, they are purchased with cash, with currency. Okay? And what's going to happen is, if this inequality holds, all goods are going to be purchased with credit cards. If this inequality holds, all goods are going to be purchased with currency. What does this mean? You know, Q is the price that you pay to use a credit card. Okay? And what is the price that you pay if you use cash to make a purchase? It's actually the interest rate that is foregone to you, because you are losing the interest rate that you could earn if you haven't used your cash to make the purchase, or instead kept it in the bank. Because if you have cash in a bank account, you can immediately withdraw it and use it for a purchase, or you can enjoy interest rate because it's in the bank. Now, the question is, are you going to withdraw the money and use it for the transaction, or you are going to use credit card and keep the money in the bank and earn interest rate? So if basically R, the interest rate that you earn from your bank account, is larger than the price of using the credit card, then of course you will use credit card because you will earn more interest rate in an alternative way. Or the opposite scenario, if credit card is more costly, then of course you are going to use cash. Therefore, so what's going to happen is, in equilibrium, so if this holds, everything is going to be purchased with credit cards. If this holds, everything is going to be purchased by cash. And basically, only when R is equal to Q, so to speak, then, you know, we are going to be indifferent. Someone is going to be indifferent, so to speak, whether the purchase is a good with cash or credit card. So that is why XT of Q equal to R is our demand, horizontal demand line. Okay, that is horizontal because here X is simply equal to R. Okay, XD of Q is equal to R, and the equilibrium basically happens to be there. Okay, and in equilibrium, as you can see, X star, the quantity of credit card services, is exactly equal to R because it is determined by R, because the equilibrium is only meaningful when R happens to be equal to Q. Okay, because if R is larger than Q, everything is purchased with credit cards, and vice versa if otherwise. And we can also do some comparative study exercise here. When R goes up, when the nominal interest rate goes up from R1 to R2, then, you know, now it is more costly to use cash to make purchases. Therefore, you have more incentives basically to keep your money in the bank and instead use credit cards to purchase goods. Therefore, you end up with purchasing more goods using credit cards. So X star, so to speak, the amount of goods that you use credit card to purchase for, goes up. Now, why are we doing this discussion with credit cards and cash, you might be wondering? We are doing this discussion because we want to obtain the demand for money. The demand for money, or money demand in short, we are going to assume that based on all this discussion about the credit card versus cash usage to make a purchase, money demand is going to be equal to this function, P times Y minus X star of R. So basically, we are assuming that MD, money demand is demand of money to carry in your pockets. It's a function of price level, positive function. The higher the price level, the higher the money demand, because the higher the price level, the more money you carry in your pocket. The higher the Y, the higher the output, and therefore your income, the more money you carry in your pocket. The higher the X star, the higher your intention to make purchases using credit card, the lower the money demand. Okay? So in that sense, money demand is a positive function of P. Positive meaning the higher the P, the higher the money demand. Money demand is a positive function of y. The higher the y, the higher the money demand. If you have more income, you will carry more money in your pocket. And then it's a negative function of x. Okay. And also in other words, it's also a negative function of r. Because the higher the r, the higher the r means you are better off keeping the money in the bank, but not carrying in your pocket because you are getting a higher interest rate. And therefore, you will use more credit cards to make purchases. Okay? So basically, money depends positively on P, positively on Y, negatively on R. Okay? So this is also discussed here. Increasing the real income, more currency required as volume of transaction increases, therefore you carry more money. Decreasing the nominal interest R. Now, decreasing it, of course, means more money to carry in your pocket. Increasing it means less money to carry in your pocket. Okay? Now, therefore, the nominal money demand function will be denoting it like this. MD is equal to P times price level times L. L is the name of the function. Comes from the word liquidity. L. L of Y, comma, R plus I. It's comma because it's a function of two things. L is a function of Y. The higher the Y, the higher the L, therefore the higher the money demand. And also it's a function of lowercase r plus I, or it was capital R here, but capital R we already know from the Fisher equation is roughly equal to lowercase r plus I. Therefore, we just replace it by it. And therefore, we make it a function of lowercase r plus I, which is real interest rate plus inflation. And for the subsequent analysis, we'll be assuming that inflation is zero, at least for now. A harmless assumption, at least, for now, as I said. Not so harmless for some other countries, maybe, but at least for some developed ones. Or maybe even for now, it is quite harmful for even developed countries. But let's say for the subsequent analysis, we are going to be assuming that it's equal to zero. So ignore inflation for now. Therefore, we are going to simply assume that money demand is a function of three things: P, price level; Y, income; R, real interest rate. And again, it depends positively on P, positively on Y, negatively on R. So when we illustrate the money demand function, money demand curve, it's a line here, but actually it's a curve. It looks like this. If we put money demand on the x-axis and the price level on the y-axis, it's a positive function. Okay? And it can shift to right or left, depending on what factor shift. For example, if y1 increases, remember, money demand is an increasing function of y. If y1 increases to y2, so here, basically y2 is larger than y1, sorry, this rotates, okay? Of course, if price level is zero, if everything is free, of course, you don't need money to make a purchase, therefore money demand is zero. But if the price level is positive, you have to carry positive amount of money in your pocket. And if you have more income, you carry, for any price level, you carry more money in your pocket. And then this is the money demand. The money supply is here. So here in the neoclassical model, which is basically also criticized by some other schools of thoughts in economics, money supply is exogenously determined by the central bank. Exogenous of the price level, money supply, for any level of the price level, money supply curve can be determined by the central bank as much as the central bank wants. So therefore, it's a vertical line here. And the intersection determines the money market equilibrium, equilibrium money, equilibrium price level. And basically now, this is the money market equilibrium. And if we add it to the equilibrium that we have seen in the previous chapter, chapter 11, the real intertemporal model. So in chapter 11, let me just make this a bit bigger. In chapter 11, we only have seen these two curves. Or these two diagrams, I would say, not curves. Labor demand, labor supply determining the labor market equilibrium. Output demand, output supply determining the goods market equilibrium. Now we have money demand, money supply that basically determines the money market equilibrium. And nothing changes here. This is still the same figures. Everything is the same. So the only thing is like that you should be careful about is you see the intersection of the output supply and output demand determines the equilibrium interest rate, equilibrium output, R star and Y star. Using that R star, we can draw the labor supply curve. Labor demand curve is the marginal product of labor. It determines W star and N star. And you see that this R star and Y star determined from the output demand, output supply that we use to draw the money demand function. Money supply is exogenously set by the central bank. Their intersection determines M star, the P star, and the equilibrium level of money. Okay. So basically, on top of these two diagrams, we just add another diagram in chapter 11, in chapter 12. So these two diagrams are from chapter 11. We add another chapter here to basically make this a monetary intertemporal model. The model that we considered in chapter 2 with these two diagrams was real intertemporal model. Now this is monetary intertemporal model. Okay. Now one immediate question is here. Let me just make this a bit smaller. Okay, so what would happen if we increase money supply? So what would happen suddenly if the central bank decides to print more money? Follows an expansionary monetary policy. Like, for example, many countries did in the pandemic, during the pandemic. So what we do here is that a level increase in the money supply. Money supply increases from M1 to M2. Suddenly, it was M1. Suddenly, central bank decides to boom it. Here, actually, I can illustrate what happens. This curve, labor market curve, does not change. Goods market curves do not change. What happens is only this money supply, vertical money supply line, vertical line, shifts to right. And therefore, it intersects the MD curve at a higher P level. Price level goes up. But W doesn't change. N doesn't change. Real interest rate R doesn't change. Output, real output doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the amount of money because the central bank now prints more money and the price level. This is called neutrality of money. And in the monetary intertemporal model, a level increase in the money supply increases the price level. Okay. Ignore the other part for now. Like it increases the price level, but has no effect on any real macroeconomic variable. Real macroeconomic variable means real interest rate, real output, real wage, and employment. These are real variables. And changing the money supply don't affect them. What does it affect? It affects the price level. It increases the price level. And therefore, it can also increase the nominal wage. Nominal wage is, remember, real wage times price level is nominal wage. Real wage, W doesn't change here. This W here is the real wage. It doesn't change. But since price level increases, real wage times price level, which is equal to nominal wage, it can change. It goes up, actually, since price level goes up. But the real variables, real wage, employment, W, and real interest rate R, real output Y, they don't change at all. Okay? This is called neutrality of money. Money is neutral. When we say money is neutral, we mean that changing the money supply does not change real quantities. And therefore, that is why, of course, there are economists who don't believe in this, who don't buy these arguments, I would say. But according to these arguments, according to neutrality of money, for economists who believe in the neutrality of money, monetary policy is not an effective policy because with monetary policy, you cannot obtain changes in real variables. You cannot, for example, you cannot obtain changes in the real GDP. You cannot have growth in real GDP, which is the main motivation of various policymakers. Okay. What about, so this basically has investigated the change in money supply. What about the changes in money demand? Okay. What would happen if money demand changes? Now, so shifts in the demand for money that occur within a day, within a week, or within a month, the very short run variables, so to speak, they are critical for a central bank. So for example, if money demand shifts like this one here money demand is like this, somehow, let's say, money demand shifts to right, or rotates rightwards, then P1 decreases to P2. And maybe if the central bank wants to keep prices stable, doesn't want deflation, it can shift the money supply curve to right, so that now the new intersection occurs here, roughly, at the same level of as the previous P. So the money supply, which is under complete control, according to this theory, money supply, which is under complete control of the central bank, can be changed by the central bank, so that changes in the money demand, or the effect of the changes in the money demand, is neutralized by corresponding changes in money supply. Okay. So money demand shifts to right. And here, I skipped one slide here, which is not very important, but here it's just, somehow a motivating slide for the change in the money demand. So money demand shifts to right because this supply of credit services for some reason shifts to left, but you can ignore this slide. It's not important. Somehow, let's say money demand shifts to right, whatever reason there is for that. Then, the central bank can basically try to neutralize the effect by changing the corresponding money supply, and vice versa. If money demand shifts to left, then central bank can try to neutralize it by shifting the money supply to left. And actually what happens is, so this money demand is quite unstable variable. It can change within 1 week, 1 day, 1 month, whatever. So different things, like here there are some potential factors that can cause a shift in the money demand, can shift all the way, all around. So that is why central bank should keep it under control and try to sort of monitor it closely, because changes in regulations, perceived riskiness of banks, new information technologies can potentially change the money demand in various directions. Okay. Now, the final thing that I want to discuss is, it's a concept, is called the liquidity trap. Okay. Now, the liquidity trap arises from the following. Typically, in practical monetary policy, the nominal interest rate cannot go below 0. The real interest rate can, because the real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus inflation. Actually, in many countries, real interest rate has been negative. In many European countries, or even in the United States, or in Turkey as well, real interest rate has been largely negative in various episodes. Like, for example, I don't know, if inflation is 3%, but the bank is offering you 1% nominal interest rate, the real interest rate is roughly approximately equal to minus 2%. It can be negative. Nominal interest rate, in practice, it doesn't really get much negative, even though there are some instances in which it has been negative, but it rarely becomes negative. And even if it becomes negative, even if nominal interest rate becomes negative, it doesn't really become too much negative. But there is a limit to that. So there is the lower bound for the nominal interest rate. Okay, it can be 0, or it can be slightly something negative, but there is some lower bound for it. This is called liquidity trap, because at that time, there is no more room to reduce the interest rate, so to speak. So, and then, of course, when there is that, like, then the question is, how can you, for example, if you are the central bank and you are basically reducing the nominal interest rate, the policy interest rate to stimulate the economy, and you reduce the interest rate all the way down, then what else? So now it reached the lower bound, then what else can you do to further stimulate the economy? Now, this was the conventional view up until 2008 or so, that below a certain level, which is the lower bound, there is no more room for the monetary policy to stimulate the economy. But this has changed drastically, especially after 2008 global financial crisis, because central banks found new, so to speak, unconventional ways, non-standard ways to still stimulate the economy, even if they have reached the lower bound. So basically, that's called, like, one example of this is quantitative easing, QE, where central banks started to purchase long maturity government debt and private assets. So they purchase all these assets. In return, they inject money into the market. And that's actually created a bunch of developments in developing countries. I generally discuss these in more upper level elective courses in economic policy. For now, I think it is fine just to know the basics of this in this intermediate macro course. And I will talk more about that in our next meeting. This is all for now. Thank you, and bye-bye.